A critical quarter is closing. The board wants answers, and a CEO makes a multi-million-dollar pivot based entirely on a strong gut feeling. That gut feeling is what psychologists call System 1 intuition. It is fast, automatic, and highly effective for generating quick ideas on the fly. But in a complex organizational setting, relying on it carries massive financial risk. The danger exists because executive intuition is structurally vulnerable to a strict set of cognitive biases. First is availability bias. Leaders naturally grab hold of information that is easily remembered or readily accessible. They falsely equate the ease of recalling a data point with its actual factual accuracy. Then there is confirmation bias. Decision-makers subconsciously filter out contradictory evidence, choosing only to process the metrics that align with their pre-existing beliefs. This diagram illustrates the most pervasive trap, the what you see is all there is bias, or WYSIWYG. An observer makes a definitive judgment based entirely on this small, illuminated circle of visible data, completely blind to the massive field of hidden variables surrounding it. Intuition is a starting point. It can generate initial hypotheses. But without an empirical safeguard to test those assumptions, relying solely on executive instinct reliably leads to expensive corporate mistakes. The systemic countermeasure to this flawed intuition is System 2, executed in the corporate world as rigorous business research. By definition, business research is a systematic, data-based, and decision-oriented process of collecting and analyzing information. Looking at this comparison table, the stark difference in methodologies becomes clear. System 1's fast, automatic ideation is directly countered by a strict analytical framework. Specifically, System 2 forces the process to slow down. It mandates checking facts and rigorously testing the initial assumptions that System 1 takes for granted. The ultimate utility of this deliberate method is that it delivers verifiable, evidence-based insights. It ensures managers act on reality, rather than a distorted perception of it. Establishing business research as a standard operational framework insulates an organization against the psychological blind spots inherent in intuitive leadership. To actually execute that analytical defense, all formal investigation is routed through one of two distinct logical frameworks. The first pathway is deductive logic. This is deployed when an existing theory is already in place to guide a new study. This flow diagram outlines the deductive sequence. You begin with an established theory, formulate a specific hypothesis, collect the necessary data, and arrive at a logical conclusion. Conversely, when analysts enter uncharted territory where no prior theory exists, they switch to inductive logic. Here, the sequence reverses. Analysts start with raw data. They observe that data for patterns, formulate an explanation for those patterns, and use that to establish a brand new theory. Whether the work is applied research meant to solve an immediate company crisis or fundamental research designed to expand broad academic knowledge, it must be powered by one of these two logical engines. Adhering strictly to either the inductive or deductive track strips away personal bias, guaranteeing the findings will remain objective and, just as importantly, replicable by other researchers. Despite moving in opposite conceptual directions, both the deductive and inductive processes share the exact same starting point. Step 1 always requires taking a vague organizational feeling, a sense that something is wrong or a metric is off, and defining it as an explicit business problem. A business problem is the identifiable space between reality and expectation. This diagram maps it clearly. There is a current situation, a desired situation, and the gap separating them. That gap represents two conditions, a threat to be fixed or an opportunity to seize. However, merely identifying that a gap exists is only a preliminary observation. A raw, unrefined gap cannot be put through rigorous data analysis. To become mathematically and logically functional, that generalized gap has to undergo a strict filtration process to yield a precise research objective. This filtration step is the demarcation protocol. It is the mandatory mechanism analysts use to force a chaotic, nebulous business issue into a specific, investigatable structure. To properly demarcate a problem, two strict requirements must be met. The problem statement must focus entirely on one clear, explicit action, and second, it must narrow its target to a single explicit outcome. Once demarcated, the problem faces two tests. First is feasibility. The necessary data must be realistically collectible. The second test is relevance. The problem must justify its existence with clear academic contributions or explicit managerial value. The demarcation process forces managers to discard intuitive noise and commit to strict, actionable, and measurable parameters that System 2 logic can actually process. Even with these protocols in place, problem demarcation remains the exact point where most analytical initiatives fall apart. Looking at the common mistakes, the pitfalls are obvious. Selecting a scope that is too broad, impossible to execute, or lacking relevance. But the most dangerous error is listed at the bottom, confusing the background symptoms with the actual business problem. When done correctly, the pipeline is clean and linear. This central flowchart maps the entire journey, from identifying the initial business issue, executing formal business research through a structured process, isolating the true business problem, and finally outputting a pristine problem statement. Formalizing the problem statement establishes the structural requirements for a study to achieve rigor, purposiveness, and parsimony. Gut feelings and fast reactions generate ideas, but they do not solve complex corporate threats. Executing this methodical, rigid structure is the only reliable way an organization can defeat its own cognitive biases and achieve true evidence-based decision-making.